Welcome back to PR After Hours. I'm your host, Alex Greenwood, bringing you your weekly cocktail of PR and marketing tips that will help you and your business. We'll continue our interview right after this message. Hello, listeners. It's me, Alex, from PR After Hours. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. And I wanted to talk to you just for a moment about the way I get this show right into your earbuds every week. It's because I use Anchor FM. Now, I've told you previously that I've been podcasting since 2006, back when we used stone knives and bear skins and a couple of Dixie cups and string. Anchor FM has really streamlined this and made it simpler for people who don't know the first thing about setting up a podcast or don't have, time to learn all the pro tools and stuff, because it's all right here. First thing it's important to know is it's free. There are certain tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. That's huge. Distribution is a big pain in the butt, to be honest with you, so it's really great Anchor FM can do that for you, and you're not paying hosting fees. That adds up every month. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place, so download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started, and be sure to join me in the virtual cocktail lounge on PR After Hours. Artificial intelligence, as it pertains to public relations and marketing, has captured the headlines and even an episode or two of this show. Today, however, we look away from AI and look at EI, emotional intelligence. According to Psychology Today, an emotionally intelligent individual is both highly conscious of his or her own emotional states, even negativity, frustration, sadness, or something more subtle, and able to identify and manage them. Such people are especially tuned in to the emotions that others experience. So, leads to the question, does emotional intelligence play a role in the public relations profession? Well, we're going to find out as we welcome Alan Samuel Cohen to the virtual lounge. For over 3 decades, Alan Cohen has worked with business leaders as an executive coach, senior marketing pro, and human resources consultant. As a sought-after speaker, author, leadership instructor, and executive coach, he has helped and inspired senior-level executives and teams to become more connected to their lives and business goals, resulting in greater performance and highly improved business results. Alan, welcome to the virtual lounge. So glad to have you.
So glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me talk about 2 of my favorite topics, which are emotional intelligence and the public relations marketing landscape. So thank you. What a great opportunity.
I appreciate that. I have been fascinated by emotional intelligence for most of my life. I think the reason why I was flattered to be told this. At one point early in my career, I had a boss who said, Alex, you've got a pretty decent amount of emotional intelligence. And I, of course, responded with, does that counterbalance my lack of intelligence quotient, and he laughed like you did. But so just help us out here beyond the description I just gave. But what is emotional intelligence, particularly as it pertains to the profession in your eyes?
Sure. So I think a lot of people think that emotional intelligence are really just soft skills and just basic good manners and just a good sense of self and others. But what I would say is that while it might be a set of soft skills, they are skills that are incredibly difficult to apply on a consistent basis. So emotional intelligence, there are actually 15 different aspects of emotional intelligence, which I work with my clients on, everything from stress management to impulse control to how we use decisions in a measured way in decision making, emotions in decision making, flexibility, empathy, vulnerability, trust. So there's a very broad spectrum of skills that emotional intelligence covers, but it's always through the lens of emotions, understanding our own emotions, managing our own emotions, and understanding the emotions of others, and how to adapt our own emotions, actions, and thoughts in order to engage in meaningful ways. So when you talk about marketing and public relations, I can't imagine how anyone can be successful in the business without working on their emotional intelligence, particularly because good public relations is rooted in our ability to build trust rapport and meaningful relationships with all stakeholders, whether it's our clients, whether it's our team members, whether it's our bosses or our employees. So I think at the most basic, it's learning how to really listen attentively, actively, and intuitively. It's expressing vulnerability to build trust. I could go on and on, but I think particularly in this moment in the world as public relations people, building trust, demonstrating vulnerability, and empathy are so important in all of our business activities.
Well, the empathy was the other E word here was on the tip of my tongue because I think empathy is a huge asset for not only for being in public relations, but for being in leadership positions. We do hear a lot right now about empathy for various obvious reasons going on. And I was speaking to a colleague this morning about this, and I mentioned I was going to be talking to you. He had a question. He said, does being a leader in business necessarily preclude not having a lot of empathy and emotional intelligence? Because to his mind, he's not seeing it. He's seeing a dearth of this with a lot of the top leaders of both in politics and in business.
Sure. Well, I speak on this all the time, and this crisis in empathy that we're seeing in the world right now. But I also feel like we're seeing a rising up in terms of communities and individuals and those who are maybe not holding the title of leader or boss in their title. We're seeing them stepping up and showing the need for demonstrating empathy. What I am noticing is that right now empathy is so needed. Employees need their bosses, their formal leaders to demonstrate empathy because we're going through these absolutely ridiculous times, and so that when things do reset, get back to normal, those employees are going to remember the leader who demonstrated empathy and those who didn't. They're going to bolt if you were overly directive, if you were tone deaf and insensitive to the needs of them, those who are now working from home, homeschooling, juggling a million things. The leader or the boss who's not being empathetic is going to be the leader who is left having to fill a lot of seats when things spring back to normal. So
is that pardon my interruption? Is that something that can be done? I think that's going to lead into the more direct part of what you do here. But how much of that is performative, kind of fake it till you make it, or can you rewire yourself to become more empathetic and therefore boost your emotional intelligence?
Absolutely. So if you think about all aspects of emotional intelligence as muscles that you can build, well, as though you were going to a gym, you can build the resiliency muscle, you can build the empathy muscle, you can build the vulnerability muscle with practice over time. So first it starts with awareness of what you're lacking or what you're overusing. Then it's practice until it turns into habit. And so that's what I do with my clients, is first help them assess what's working in terms of their emotional intelligence profile and what isn't, taking feedback from their team members and from other stakeholders. And then we have a map and we can determine, is that lack of empathy or that lack of demonstration of empathy impacting her ability to close sales or to engage employees or to keep people in their positions. So absolutely, in answer to your question, is that any aspect of emotional intelligence can be built, or it can be dialed back if it's not working for you. For instance, assertiveness is an aspect of emotional intelligence. Some people have low assertiveness and need to practice being more assertive. We deal with some of the beliefs underneath that keep them from being assertive. But some leaders and employees are overly assertive and come across as aggressive or as bullies, for them we have to learn how to balance that out with empathy, or how to dial back the assertiveness so that they can be more effective in their communications. So this is unlike personality assessments, personality tools like Myers-Briggs or EQ is a very fluid kind of system. And that's what I love about it. I can work with any individual and help build their emotional intelligence by assessment, practice, until it becomes habit.
Just to amplify what you're saying there, having been almost 30 years in this business, I do a lot of my work now. My niche around here is, and I do some generalist stuff as well, but it's crisis communication planning.
Yeah.
And one of the benefits I think I bring to the table as somebody who's got decent emotional intelligence is that I help people craft reactions to potential scenarios and the areas where they may have blind spots. And I'm not casting aspersions that they don't have emotional intelligence, but they're so wrapped up in the blinders on what they do.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can be the guy going, okay, this is how this particular audience will respond, this, and this.
Absolutely. You pass the emotional intelligence test right there. So the impulse control is an aspect of emotional intelligence. It's and our impulses to hit send too fast on an email, to dash something out without really considering it. Tone deaf marketing is often a result of poor impulse control. That's why we want to build impulse control in communications professionals, because our first impulses aren't always the best impulses. We look at what's happening in the world right now. I actually just got off of a webinar about tone deaf marketing, and we have to be impeccable with our communications right now in this highly polarized, highly energized environment. And so to really filter our communications through that lens of emotional intelligence. How is this going to land given what's going on right now? What do we really want to project? Where do we need to look at an empathetic response? Where do we need to be more directive? So absolutely, like, these tools are so necessary right now in this climate.
Yeah, and so what we're talking about here too is you've got a program called the EQ Advantage, correct?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the basics here, and I'll let you talk about it. It's your program, but it's a 12-week program, correct? And so tell us a little bit about this, if this is what you want to share about a little bit about
Well,
how this is beneficial.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to share about that. So, well, I do a lot of work with small businesses and big businesses, NBC and Simon & Schuster, and lots of leading PR agencies. I come from an agency background myself. A real sweet spot for me is working with men in particular, male entrepreneurs, small business owners, and coaches too, different kinds of coaches, to help build their emotional intelligence through a program I call the EQ Advantage, where they identify a project or something that they want to get done within a very short span of time. So within 3 months, they want to start building a movement or getting a TED Talk or whatever it is that they want. I help them. I structure a program for them and use emotional intelligence really as the catalyst for them to get what it is that they want to achieve. And it's a very exciting and somewhat radical approach to goal setting. And
yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot and say, well, can you give us an example? Maybe you can't. Maybe it's too deep a subject to get into in the time we have. But I'm just curious if somebody's interested in doing something like that, what do you tell them to get them in the door there? How does this work?
Sure. Well, so I believe that everything that we want, everything that we get in our lives, and everything that we want and we don't get in our lives is directly related to our level of emotional intelligence. And so really understanding what it is that is an important goal to you first is the first step, and then looking at what aspects of your emotional intelligence are out of whack or are underutilized that might be getting in the way of your getting that goal. So for instance, so I'm a TEDx speaker myself. I know that for me, I had to really build up my self-regard in order to stay in the process, which for me had a lot of setbacks along the way in terms of rejections and whatnot. So building confidence, building self-regard is so important when we're putting ourselves out onto bigger stages. Impulse control, often I'll work with people who, because they have such low impulse control, they're paralyzed to put content out into the world as to really own their thought leadership. So we have to build lower their impulse control in some ways, so they're not always trying to be perfect.
Right.
Instead of trying to get things out.
The Seth Godin thing, ship it. Finally, you've got to get it out there. You can't just sit on it because you fear that you're going to be rejected all the time.
Exactly. So it's really, so EQ, a lot of it is the inner work that helps people get the outer results.
Sounds a little bit like therapy, is it?
Yeah, well, yes and no, right? So therapy, similar to therapy in that generally there will be some sort of a result. There'll be some sort of an action, though something will change if you commit to that process, but different from therapy in that it's much more focused on transformation, on shifting somebody from where they are presently to a future state, rather than focusing on what happened in the past that got them to where they are today.
Very good. The way this works, then, I assume of course it's online now, right? Has it always been online, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's always been online. Although I do a lot of work with companies and emotional intelligence in person, especially when working with teams to help develop their emotional intelligence. But the group coaching program that I do, the EQ Advantage, the next cohort starts in October. But we're opening the cart very soon. People can reach out to me for information, and that's all online. 12-week program online.
Yeah, and that's going to be in the show notes, alansamuelcohen.com. Something that stood out for me when I was looking about the EQ Advantage too was this lone wolf aspect. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by the lone wolf?
And I think that's one of the benefits that the men who do my programs get is the accountability and the support and the camaraderie from other men, like-minded men who are also up to something big, trying to get something done that's important in the world, get their voice out. But I think men largely do suffer from that lone wolf syndrome, where they feel like they've got to shoulder the burden on their own, especially in, but solopreneurs, by virtue of the name, it suggests that it's so low and have to do everything on their own. So learning how to ask, building that muscle of asking for help. Sometimes it's okay to be independent, but sometimes it's okay to be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm struggling here, I need help. That can be powerful. So breaking through a lot of that limitation of feeling like you have to do everything for yourself is an important part of the programs that I put out there.
Well, because you do talk about how, particularly men of a certain age, I'm definitely one of them, maybe they didn't grow up in a situation where this behavior was modeled when they were children.
Yeah, I think that often asking for help, that kind of vulnerability, was perceived as a sign of weakness. And I believe that in fact, it's a sign of strength to ask for help and to enlist the help and support of others. It allows people to connect more to you. And hopefully you're also making yourself available to others to support them. But we don't achieve great levels of success by going it alone. And I think that's really important to note.
Let me just pull it back a little bit here and just tell you, not an experience particularly, but kind of a vibe that I've had for several years with a lot of my clients that I seem to get into. It's either kind of a consigliere vibe or even a therapy type vibe where they really do. And I think that is a byproduct of the fact that I'm emotionally available and emotionally intelligent. Mm-hmm. Do you see that in the profession? If we can go back to 20,000 feet and just look at the profession, what is your take on how the profession does that? Do you see professionals saying the same thing to you that I just did, or no?
Well, I've worked with CEOs and presidents of PR agencies, for instance, and a lot of them really do struggle with, well, one of the reasons that I am retained is because I can be that trusted advisor to that powerful CEO who doesn't have anybody else within their organization who they can really trust about whether it's their anxiety, their stress about the business not being where it is, or talking about succession planning, or problems that they might be having with their senior team members. So it really is creating that safe space for them to where everything is on the table. They can talk about their relationship struggles at home that are interfering with how they're showing up at work. I know I've had CEOs of companies share with me issues around alcoholism and substance abuse, and gambling issues, and I've heard it all. So as a coach who practices holistically, I'm going to help them hit their revenue targets, but I'm also going to help them feel a greater sense of fulfillment and wholeness and wellness when they show up and work every day. That's something that I think that leaders within organizations really value, is that trusted advisor who doesn't have an agenda, who really only wants what's best for you and the organization.
Doesn't have an agenda. That's an interesting point, because I think that particularly when I'm brought in as an outside consultant, I mean, I've been on my own for 10 years, but back in the day when I was actually part of the hierarchy, I did get a little pushback from colleagues who thought, oh, Alex is trying to ingratiate himself to the boss. What's he up to? It's just office politics. But then when you get out in the world where I am now, which I think a lot of PR consultants are at, yeah, because our only agenda is what? It's just to come in, do our job, consult, and help. We're not trying to take over the company. We're not trying to topple the leader.
Absolutely. My job is to make you look good, and hopefully I'm working myself out of a job. I've grown my business because of referral. And so, it's not about sticking around beyond my value. It's
Right.
Would like to help you get the result as fast as you can, empower you with the tools and the skills, and teach you how to coach your employees, and I'm out. All right. I'm on to the next thing.
I remember when I kind of broke up with a client that I'd had for a couple of years, but it wasn't acrimonious. It was just I didn't feel right about being on the retained payroll, because I got to a point where all the goals they had set for me to help them with are done.
Right.
But they still said, well, why are you going? I was like, because
Right.
I can't sleep well knowing I'm taking your money and I'm really not providing the kind of level of service I started with a year ago.
Right. And listen, honestly, it makes me think of the bad therapy jokes. It's you're out the door, you have that last session with your therapist, and as you're walking out the door, the therapist says, maybe we should talk a little bit about your relationship with your mother. It's well, let's just do 5 on that. All right. So, so it's there's always more that you can do, but it isn't always necessary. And
perfect. I know we've only scratched the surface here, but I'm sure I didn't ask about something about this related to this that I should have, or maybe next steps people should take. I'll throw the ball to you and let you spiral it back.
Sure. So well, first of all, I'd love to just gift your audience. So you can go to bit.ly/ASC leadership. And I've got a great infographic about 5 tips to use emotional intelligence to lead through uncertainty and change. So
Sweet.
That is something you can download right away. I'm really happy to talk to anyone in your community about how to use emotional intelligence within your business or your solopreneurship or your organization. And would love to set up discovery calls with anybody, no strings attached, just to see if I can help give you a new perspective.
I don't know, Alan, you seem pretty high pressure.
I just turned a big age.
Uh-oh.
I'm entering into it's my last year of my 50s. And there is something just so freeing about not forcing outcome. It's a nice feeling.
I do find that the older I get and the longer I've been in the business, I think this is news to the people 20 years behind us or 30 years behind us even who listens. Right. Hey, listen, with experience comes, for want of a better term, comes wisdom. But wisdom to me is really just the ability to know not to sweat the small stuff, and to just be who you are, do the best you can.
Yeah. It's there's certain phrases that to me just, they trigger me. It's like having to crush it, or nail it, or it just feels so, it's so dominant, I don't feel like pushing or exerting pressure on anyone or anything, rather just kind of let the good stuff flow and just be ready to accept it. That I think that pushing it and crushing it is very 80s.
I could go on about that.
It doesn't mean that we don't have goals, and it doesn't mean that we're assertive in going after them, but energetically, I think, we don't want to be perceived as sleazy salesmen. And
I'm a pretty low pressure in that regard too, because I will have a consultation. I will come up with a proposal. I'll fire it off, but I do not call them an hour later and say, "Did you read it? Did you read it?" That's, by the way, there's just this trend that's driving me nuts here, and that listeners know. Here goes Alex chasing rabbits. Real quick before I let you go,
I love it. I love it.
But it is this sales tactic you get on LinkedIn all the time, where it's like, "Hey, we do this, this, and this. Can we jump on a call right now and talk?" Or here's a link to my calendar. Schedule a call. And it's almost as if they're passive aggressively putting the sales process right in my lap, and then I almost feel obligated to respond.
Well, it's the last night I had, and we'll leave on this note. I had somebody reach out to me on Facebook Messenger, and I'll talk to anyone, but they the first question was, do you have fitness goals? I always thought the guy's a health coach, and so I just responded. I said, "So is that your opening line?" And he got all defensive, and I didn't even respond. But it's just like I'm all about connection. It's like let's see if there's some rapport, let's see if relationship first, and then I'll ask you about what you do, and if see if there's business we can do together. But I just think that some of the finesse people have the finesse in relationships. It's very emotional intelligence. Learn how to listen and respond appropriately.
I often say nuance is dead, but I'm doing my best to revive it.
I think you're doing
Alan Samuel Cohen. If you want to learn more, alansamuelcohen.com. Links will be in the show notes along with the link to that graphic. Thanks so much for that little nugget for us. Thanks so much for being here in the virtual lounge.
Thanks, pal.
Oh, you know what that means? Looks like it's last call here at your virtual lounge for PR news, views, and interviews. Don't forget, you can ask me a question anytime. You can do it through our Twitter account, which is @HoursPR, or even better, you can send me a message vocally. I would love to hear your voice, and I'll answer it on the show. There's a link in the show notes. All you have to do is sign up through Anchor FM. It's free, doesn't take long. And you record your message, I get the message, I will play your audio. Just give me your first name and the city you live in, and then I will answer the question to the best of my ability right here on the show. Don't forget to, if you're enjoying this podcast, you can support it and help increase the frequency and value of the show. Just consider being a sponsor for your brand or your agency or just yourself because you're like, I like this show. Or just drop a few coins in the virtual tip jar. Either way, there's links in the show notes. Please check that out. All of that, of course, being in the show notes where you're listening right now or at prafterhours.com. I see that they're turning up the lights. Last call is over, and I've got to clean up this virtual lounge. And until next time, I'm Alex Greenwood, and you've been listening to PR After Hours on Anchor FM.